Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification before Ms. Torres leaves. Does she need to correct the record on a statement you made a minute ago about this committee defunding the DC police?
This committee will ultimately support the budget that we're proposing, and this committee is proposing $20 million.
Does this budget defund, as you say, the District of Columbia Metropolitan Police Force?
Absolutely. It defunds the Metropolitan Police Force by $20 million in preparedness dollars that they need.
I think there is a difference between saying we're defunding something, that's a declarative statement that suggests that we are taking all funds away from law enforcement in DC, and that is simply not true. Simply not true. So I personally would like for the record to be clarified on that. I won't belabor the point. I want to thank the panel for being here today. My first question is for the Chief Financial Officer. There's been a lot of discussion about work from home as it concerns the federal government. And a significant percentage of the federal government continues to work from home. I don't think there's any question that because there are nearly 800,000 jobs in the District of Columbia and less than half of those jobs are filled by people who live in the District of Columbia.
That is correct.
That a significant number of people who fill jobs in the District of Columbia are working from home based on federal policy. This has to concern anybody associated with DC government, because if you're working from home, you're not commuting, so WMATA is automatically affected, likely, bus service, transit services, those kinds of things. You're not eating in local restaurants, so those restaurateurs are impacted, not shopping in DC-related business. So this has a cascading effect. This is not just simply an issue of whether you should work from home or not, is it not?
Work from home, as the key statistic to think about, is because we're an office-based economy, ultimately, people come here to work in offices. Our offices are utilized about 50% of what they were prior to the pandemic. That's not unusual across the country for major cities. And that then leads to the economic circumstances that I described. Very slow revenue growth. In particular, our property tax on commercial properties is actually declining fairly significantly. On the other hand, other revenues are buoying up our total revenue outlook. So the bottom line is remote work hinders the growth of our economy, our revenue streams, as it does most major cities across the country. So that is absolutely true.
Mr. Womack, if I could just add. So
Please do.
Federal workers are not the majority of workers in the district, but they are a significant number. And when they don't come into work, it means, because many of them use WMATA or Metro, that means there are fewer riders on Metro, which is why Metro right now has a funding crunch. It means that these office buildings are vacant, and many of them are now the leases are being turned back, and so that means real property values have gone down and our real property tax has gone down. And then when workers are in their offices, many of them go out for lunch, or they go and buy something, a gift, or maybe they stick around for dinner or beer after work, and they're not, so our sales taxes are down. So it's hurting us in at least those three ways.
All right, so I would, and I'm a former mayor, and so this kind of stuff really interests me, because what impacts the city economically certainly has an impact on the DC government. Is it possible, Mr. Lee, that we haven't fully realized the impact of the commercial real estate bubble, as I call it?
Yes, we anticipate commercial values to continue to decline for 2 to 3 years, but frankly, we're in uncharted waters for commercial real estate in many central cities. We don't know in the longer run how the use of space will change with a much higher proportion of workers working remotely. So to the best of our ability, we're estimating further decline, but we don't we don't know whether that would actually, if it's not going to be worse than that.
Mayor, I'm going to ask you to weigh in here for a second. I know you don't like the federal government telling you guys how to operate, but I'm going to give you a chance to tell us how we should operate. Would you recommend to the bureaucracy, as it were, that people come back to work?
Thank you for that question.
That's a softball for you.
It's a softball. I'll take it. And this is how it would start. It's up to us to change our trajectory. So the CFO's responsibility is to estimate out over several years, and I think his estimate suggests that we haven't hit the bottom in commercial value decline, and maybe we would in a couple of years. But I take that as a challenge for our team to change our trajectory. The biggest thing that the federal government can do is have a centralized return to the office plan. It can be done. We did it. We have 37,000 employees in the District of Columbia. They came back to the office in June following the pandemic. We have a 4-day per week in-person policy. And quite frankly, the federal government's disparate policies, if you work for the IRS is this, if you work for energy is that, if you work for Treasury is something else, is problematic, not just for the federal employees, but also a lot of the private sector who say, this is what they say to me, we'll come back 5 days a week when the feds come back 5 days a week. And so we need a centralized policy that makes sense. And all of the things that my colleagues here have suggested will improve. But more than that, Mr. Womack, it's also important for us in the National Capital Region to say we're proud to host the federal government. We've built for many decades an infrastructure that supports a productive American workforce. And so we want to also have a very thoughtful conversation about how those federal agencies in the National Capital Region makes sense for American productivity.
I appreciate the response. In the vernacular of softball, you hit that one out of the park.
Thank you.
I yield back.